don't know what you mean by bowling. It meant something different.
You can see the symbol rolling on the first one.
I call this meeting to order for the purpose of special meeting to consider taking action on various athletic items, to review the roadmap categories. Yes. Ms. Wilkes, would you like to speak to us, please?
All right. How are you guys doing this afternoon?
Well,
Good.
Glad to be here.
fine.
There's a couple things I wanted to address with you first. I think the swim is the first one on the list. Okay. So right after the board meeting on July 21st, obviously, we had a phone call that the ISU repaired their swimming pool. And so with the repair of the swimming pool, we definitely went to ISU Facilities Committee and talked to them about reintroducing our swim program, if that was going to be doable, because of all the safety and health concerns that they had at ISU. Repeatedly got put on hold day after day after day. A week went by, and finally we got word that yes, we can hold meets there. We're very limited, which was what was expected, to dual meets only, 24 participants on each team, primarily because we can only have 4 athletes per lane. But we feel like this is doable. We have a staff in place, coaching staff in place, that's very ambitious and willing to do the hard work. So our recommendation as administrative staff is to, first off, recognize that this fluid flexibility of COVID, but to restore the swim program for each of the high schools as we move forward through this process. Any questions for me?
Do you have all teams have coaches or just one?
All the teams currently now
And they're
have,
all IHSAA certified?
they will be. They're in the process of doing that right now. So yes,
Okay, they will be.
yes.
And they won't meet as a group, they are separate.
Correct. We need to have them separated due to the numbers as well.
Well, I see maximum team size 24,
Correct.
and that comes up somewhat less than the 75 that you had. So how are you making?
That work, we're gonna
Yeah.
have tryouts. And currently, if, they'll have a 3-day
Wasn't that-
tryout period.
That's a shame.
It is.
Okay.
But right now, we're looking at this as an opportunity to get back in the pool that we didn't think was an opportunity. So we're optimistic, and it's pretty close to 75, shy short of 3 athletes that do have an opportunity that wouldn't have a couple weeks ago.
Perfect.
Any other questions?
No, perfect.
So can those 3 maybe be alternates or something? Can you do something so if there's just 75 and we're short 3? is that-
24 per team is
Yeah.
The key thing why the number 24 was
Yeah.
a key number was because we could only have 4 kids per lane within that hour.
Yeah, so I'm just talking about, so if you have to eliminate 3 kids, you say through tryouts, right? There's 75 trying out?
No,
Oh, that's what I
typically at Century we had, I believe, 33 athletes last year, so we would have probably 7, 8
Okay.
that would not make the cut.
Okay.
So but the other 2 will be okay then?
Does that make sense?
So it's.
Century, we had, I believe, 33 athletes Highland last year, so we would had have probably
Almost 30.
7, 29, 8,
If
not 30. So they would have
that
to make
would
cuts
not
too.
make,
And that's,
cut.
that's assuming that 30 would come out. We had seniors, freshmen, but
So there had to be more than 75.
Pocatello High School only had 8,
Oh, only had 8.
yes. But they're currently ready to advertise and hopefully get more than that this year.
All right.
Does that help?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, just a quick update. I just want to make sure that the board is current on the changes of the athletic and activity guidelines and procedures. The IHSAA recommendations, we want to make sure we move forward, and we have done all the requirements on the 4 requirements. If you look at, and I'm not sure if they have this, but the 2 little things, if you don't have this right away at your fingertips, is that we added 2 load buses. We're going to load them back to front and unload them front to back. We added that. And then we added that if a parent, we had some parents concerned about the busing and so forth, that a parent can, with written request prior, take their athlete, nobody else, to the event. So we added those 2 things. We had a coaches meeting last Thursday, went really well, very productive. We really talked about the fight is not whether to wear masks or not wear masks, but keep those athletes on the field as long as possible. And if that meant that we need to wear masks any other time other than being on participating, we would do that. It'd be worth it. The other piece of paper that you should have there is the venue capacity. We have ordered, do they have this, Renee?
It's
In the addendum. We have ordered stickers, and currently more than half is already out to the schools. The high schools, middle schools will get theirs tomorrow. But they're going to place these 6-foot stickers on the bleachers so that spectators will seat 6 feet apart from each other and wear a mask. And so the numbers that you see there are how many that they would be able to accommodate with a 6-foot distance. So at the like Century High School, the big gym, if you look at that, it's 200 and so forth. Highland High School,
So you won't
400
allow families to sit together then?
absolutely. So this is a minimum. So an athlete, depending on the venue, depending on what category we're in, would be allowed 2 family members or 4. And the families sit together, so this is minimum. The student body section has to sit single. They cannot sit together.
Right.
So we're going to have a student body section and a number, and we're going to communicate every week with the other ADs that we're in conference with to talk about where we're at with spectator expectations. So where we go is going to be limited as well. Who's coming towards us will say, hey, we have 91 seats. If it's a family, that takes up 1 seat, a family of 2. And we'll do it by the roster. So Johnny has 2 come in, and they'll mark that down.
I see.
Okay, so how are you going to enforce this distance thing? So you don't,
To the best of our ability. Washing the nation right now, our big motto going forward is to keep on playing. So to the best of our ability, we're going to have extra adults on hand. Parents are doing pretty good. We had a few parent meetings already. They're all wearing masks. The social distance is a little bit harder, but right now those stickers, those big yellow stickers, are not on the bleachers currently, and they will be by the time we have our first event, outside and inside.
and they're limited to 2 families. Is that what you-
Depending on what category we're in, so it could be up to 4 per athlete or 2, and depending on the venue. If you notice Highland High School, Iron Horse Stadium, we have 900 spots there. Of course, we could probably accommodate more. But we have to be very thoughtful at the visiting side and so forth to make sure that that's part of that number. So all of you have heard what's happened with Holt Arena, and we worked really hard in the last few days pulling together what that'll look like at the football stadiums. We are going to utilize Iron Horse and Century High School football stadium to the maximum potential. Right now, we have it worked out with the schedule that we currently have without having to move any dates to use Iron Horse for Highland High School games and Pocatello High School games, all of them. And Century High School will utilize theirs. Currently, we have the issue, I just got notified we're out of porta potties in town. I think it's like toilet paper. I'm not sure why porta potties are out of, so we're looking frantically for porta potties at this moment.
You know, weren't they in the process of going to build concession or
That was my big outdoor facility committee meeting that right in March, right before we went into the shutdown. But yes, this is definitely a voice of why.
didn't they have some private funding for that?
Yes, but not
But,
but not
yes, partial.
partial, okay.
And just for one.
So for press boxes, we're using Coke wagons at Iron Horse.
Mm.
Yeah, concession wagons. But we got them squared away, and we're going to make this work. We're all about those kids playing.
Didn't we do some work over to Hawthorne Field to
So
present that so we could use that for a field?
absolutely. So the reason that we cannot hold a varsity football game at Hawthorne is not enough bleacher space
Okay.
and no lights.
Oh, no lights.
No lights. So again, why we were working with that outdoor facility committee moving forward.
Right.
But right now, and we cannot host, I know our coach would really love for us to host some varsity games at Irving just because of the atmosphere and things like that. But I even contacted IHSAA yesterday. The width is not wide enough for safety precautions.
Mm.
We cannot host a varsity game there.
But we can't junior varsity, and
Mm-hmm.
can we?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Not for me.
I mean, there's lots of good news in the sense that we are doing really well. Sports, football started last Friday. Everything else started yesterday. We're doing really well. We're moving forward. Our county, Bannock County, is thriving right now, and every day we're just so grateful we're out on those fields every day.
I do have one more question. So
Yes.
how does the general public get a pass to this, say they don't have a student playing or anything, how does that happen?
We will have, and so the seating will be primarily first for the parents. Then they'll have a section for student body and section for the public, and those will be advertised and very transparent on what venues can offer what opportunities for the spectators to be there. If we were in Holt Arena, we were hoping that we could offer pixel-lock cameras that you could view those games, but with being outdoors, we cannot offer that. Volleyball, indoors with the gyms, we can offer that. They can watch those through the pixel-lock cameras with NFHS, but we are limited. If we go to Category 2, we will be limited to only parents. And if we get to the higher end level of Category 2, almost to Category 3, we'll have no spectators, just so the kids can keep playing. And that's across the whole Southeast Idaho district. We're fortunate that most schools are only allowing parents. Smaller schools are different, but most schools are only allowing parents.
Cross-country team's gonna run then?
Cross-country team is still, going strong. I know that we think of cross-country as probably a low-risk sport, but if you think about the actual meet itself, they run in packs, heavy breathing, and most often vomiting, which I would too after I ran. I'm vomiting afterwards. So it's a high-risk sport. Practice, not so much. We definitely have the protocols. If an athlete is tested positive, they're really trying hard, if they can, in the sport to work in cohorts so the whole team doesn't have to quarantine, just whoever was within their cohort working.
I did hear of one school where they're selling car spaces around the football field. I mean, I know we can't do that, but
Yes,
that's the big,
that's probably high commodity. Could
Yeah.
get some pretty good money there.
they're selling, that's how their fundraising is.
As an athletic director, as the athletes, as the coaches, fans are a good reason why we play, and so it's hard. It's really hard, but ultimately our goal is to keep those kids every day out on the field. Any other questions?
Okay, let's do it.
Okay.
I would entertain a motion to consider reinstating the swimming program for the 2020-2021 school year. Is there a motion?
I move that we reinstate the swimming program as stated.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hearing none opposed, that motion is passed. The second one we have here is to entertain a motion to consider adopting the revised IHSAA guidelines. Is there a motion?
I move that we adopt the revised IHSAA guidelines.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, hearing all in positive, that has passed. Next item, thank you.
Thank you.
The board has some options to consider. Ms.
First, we'll go back to the presentation of the
Presentation.
Of the what? Of
On the roadmap. Yeah,
Oh.
yep. Okay. Mr. Chairman, board members, thank you for making time to come in this afternoon. I know this was not a regularly scheduled meeting, but it's very important nonetheless as we set the direction for the coming school year. As you will recall, 3 weeks ago, we had you take action to adopt the roadmap as it was presented to you, and we were able to clarify and answer your questions. But since that time, 3 weeks ago, as all time, seems to be moving faster or slower, depending on your perspective. And a lot has transpired, let me just say that, in 3 weeks. And so we asked the board to adopt the roadmap based upon our work and consultation with Southeast Idaho Public Health Department. And at the time, we were looking specifically at what the SIPH had presented as far as the numbers, so that we could not, or we would not have to rely on arbitrary data. And so those numbers were set at 88 for our area and so that's based upon so many per 100,000 or 10,000. I'm not sure. Anyway, and so 88 was kind of the magic number. And so that's what we were looking at as far as what we would recommend to you with the opening of school. And this is very fluid. It is a dynamic virus and all the conditions associated with it. And so we have visited with our Pocatello Education Association officers. We have received some feedback from parents, staff, teachers, just as I'm assuming the board has received a number of correspondence and perhaps phone calls and personal visits. And so we thought it was important for you to have an opportunity to discuss where we're at and where we're going moving forward. Likewise, other areas have already taken action. The Boise Treasure Valley area has taken their action and set direction from their board. And so again, we wanted to have you give you an opportunity to discuss how those all of this comes into play for Pocatello Chubbuck School District. And so with that, I want to first invite Mrs. Fisher up to talk to you about a conference call that she had today with Maggie Mann. And on that call, I think Brenda, Tanya, and Dave were also part of that. But we have some insight from Southeast Idaho Public Health to share with you. And then we will work through what I'm going to present as another option for you to consider as we think about opening schools this year. Courtney?
Good afternoon, thank you. So as you know, we have been having a weekly conference call and sometimes multiple touch points with Miss Maggie Mann, who's the director of the Southeast Idaho Public Health Department. So Ms. Brenda Miner, Mr. Dave Miner, and Ms. Tanya Wilkes, and myself have all been on those calls weekly. So today we wanted to have a conversation and we set that August 11th deadline for making our decision. That was what Ms. Mann really felt as far back as they could realistically go to allow us to make the decision for which instructional model are we going to start school with. So I just wanted to share some discussion points with you today that we feel are really important. So she expressed today that Bannock County is currently okay, but continues to really just butt up against that threshold for transitioning into the moderate stage. Our numbers have increased from this time last week. Last week we were around 55. This week, as of yesterday, we were at 74. I'm not sure what those current numbers, they usually report the day's levels in the afternoon. So she is anticipating that those numbers will continue to rise as they are rising in neighboring counties. Based on this information, SIF's recommendation to us, which was a bit surprising, I don't think any of us were anticipating this, but they wanted us to take a very preventative approach and recommended that we start in a more hybrid setting. So she also noted, she thought it was important to note that our mask requirement strengthens our ability to attend school in person. We are the only school district in the 8-county region that SIF serves that has that mask requirement. But they continue to be concerned about the ability to physical distance in settings like hallways and lunchrooms. That's one of their primary concerns. So they are anticipating a spike in cases after Labor Day. However, the spike after July 4th was much less severe than they anticipated. So they're watching that closely. So after hearing this recommendation, which again was a little bit surprising to us, because we want to really stay aligned with our roadmap as we continue to make these decisions throughout the year, we shared the information with Ms. Mann that we're going to be presenting to you today to hear her thoughts and share that feedback with her. So after hearing that, after consulting with our team to review our proposed recommendations, Ms. Mann offered the following. Pocatello-Chubbuck School District 25 leadership is taking a proactive approach that helps to ensure educational growth for learners while also reducing risk of the spread of COVID-19 to learners, faculty, and staff, and thereby our community. SIF supports their approach 100%. She really liked the fact that that we were taking a really blended approach, which we'll share more specifics about that with you momentarily.
Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you.
So as you'll recall too, we presented a traditional model, and then in that moderate category, it was modified traditional as well as hybrid, and then of course that far category is the remote learning. So as Courtney just presented, we are offering for you another consideration in the fact that we could do a blended hybrid model. And in your addendum today is a sheet which I think lays this out very nicely, and we would like to quickly take you through it and then allow you time to ask us questions about any of the models and the impacts to education, to our learners, to our families, and we will do our absolute best to field those questions for you. So with that said, I think we'll start with Lori, then we'll have Sue come up, and then we'll have Dave Miner talk to you about special services.
And they all have this? Okay, great. So you'll see there that the proposal is for a modified traditional instructional model at the elementary schools. What that means is that students will be at the school every day, Monday through Friday, but what we will do is really up our cohorting of students. So as we envision it, our elementary schools, they're designed, our learners are assigned to a teacher. Those students will stay with that teacher as much as possible. Music, instead of going out to music class, for example, the music teacher will come into the room so that the students don't even have to be crossing in the hallways. We will not be doing interventions such as we do now, where they leave the classroom and they participate with other students from other classrooms together in a separate room. They'll be getting those in the classroom so that we keep our cohorts of students together just as much as possible. Lunches, all of those are spaced apart. They've revised their lunch schedules so that they can minimize the number of students in the cafeteria, using all kinds of extra spaces in the building so that we can, again, be able to distance our students.
How are you going to do that, though, with 24 and sometimes even 30 kids in a classroom?
So what we'll do is,
Possibly going to spread them out, and they're in there all day long. I just don't know how you're going to space them.
well, we'll space them as far apart as we can. We know that that our schools, in any schools, they cannot, the 6-foot physical distancing, we will not be able to do that in any schools. We do the best we can. The masks, requiring masks, really gives us that oh, I don't know if it's flexibility, but gives us that,
Well, couldn't you do that with split sessions? I mean, like the hybrid models where you do AB, you could distance them more.
we could distance more with the hybrid model, we definitely could. Mm-hmm.
You know, that's what concerns me with putting all those elementary kids. I see looks like your secondary level, you're promoting a hybrid model, you know, and I don't know why elementary
And
is
then-
different.
Yep, through our cohort model.
And then maybe some of that will
Okay.
into place, and
Okay.
then we'll be sure to answer the questions.
Yeah, so,
I'll just wait till you.
okay. So I hope I can answer them there, but as you can see, we will distance it, you know, even when we will not be grouping kids together, we will be keeping the students near their desks and all. That's what we envision. We've gone through all different aspects of the day to try to say, how are we going to do this differently? When they drop off, you know, in the morning, where do our fifth graders go? They go over here. Where do our fourth graders go? They go over here, so that we can distance students as much as possible. I do understand that, you know, we will be having all of our students there, but we feel that there's such a difference with the secondary where they're changing classes, changing teachers, that by keeping them all together, that we do reduce some of that risk.
My turn?
I don't know if you'll have a lot of questions.
I'm sure you will. So in secondary, we looked at modified traditional and cohorting, but that is not a possibility for secondary. A ninth grade student could be taking a regular math class, an honors English class, a biology class, and the ninth grader right next to him is taking maybe the same biology class, but 4 different other classes. So they can't cohort. So our best bet for being able to add some physical distance and some space would be to hybrid. So our students would attend school 2 days a week in face-to-face, and then 3 days a week remotely. And part of the reason that we went with that is that our secondary students are more independent learners. They're more independent learners, and then it decreases the number of learners in our hallways and in our cafeterias and our mass meeting areas. And that was the biggest concern. In the classroom, we were okay, but as soon as they get in the hallway, there are, 8 to 1,600 kids in a hallway or in a lunchroom, and so there was just no way to be able to physically distance in that area and be able to modify that. So we're suggesting, like I said, that we do hybrid in secondary. They are, that age student is easier to stay and supervise their own learning, where an elementary student, it's difficult for them to supervise their own learning at home. And our parents depend on us giving their kids a safe place to be, especially at that age group.
One of the driving factors is that as we looked at learning and what would happen with especially our very young, young learners, that having them home 3/5 of the week it's very difficult for learning to be continuing because of the type of learning that takes place with our lower grade students as compared to there. So we were exploring all different possibilities, and it's like, we know that the cohorting at the elementary, we can keep our learners together. When they're in the hallways, we can say, you line up, you go on this side of the hallway. That doesn't happen as we started to envision it at the secondary level, we could see that doesn't happen very well for them to.
Well, and I might share a comment I heard from some parents who are in an elementary setting where they're doing online, and this isn't in our district, but they were saying how it's much easier for their secondary child to do that, because their elementary child, to type one sentence takes them 15 minutes. Or,
Yeah.
They don't have the skills yet online to utilize that like secondary do. So, and they were concerned that teachers didn't realize how long it takes them to answer some things. They're all day trying to type.
Those were definitely considerations that we had to take. We have talked about this from, over and over and over,
Every angle you
pros
could
and
get to.
cons, and looked at it from every different angle. And we understand that, in a classroom, to keep them 6 feet apart, that's going to be difficult, so we'll have to maintain, and that's what, as we've looked at different models and read, that it is like, you maintain as much of a distance as you can between them. The masks help tremendously, and encouraging that, and, making that's just going to be a part of the day. We can also, with our elementary learners, I think about how we can convince them that masks are pretty cool, and we can get them to wear them, and we can get them to keep them on, and all that will be.
Lori,
Something
what's
that
the
we can.
response from the teaching staff?
We've asked, so we met with the PEA,
Mhm.
and they had a representative from the elementary school there, because I've worried about that too. And hers was that they saw this as being a possibility there. Our principals we haven't surveyed all of the staff. We know we're going to have the gamut of people who are fearful and all. The principals, as we've worked with them and they've talked with their BLTs and all, we know that for learning this, and we think we can keep them safe.
Mhm.
Can we 100% keep them safe? Nobody can guarantee that anywhere, and that is, it would be really, we'd be really amiss to say that we're going to, but we can definitely work to minimize the risk with, I think, the cohorts and some of the measures that we're taking in the schools, because we know that learning would be a huge detriment to our students'
I just
learning.
received some,
Did you receive?
concerns about,
Mhm.
and I was, Yeah.
Can we have you talk to me?
oh, sure.
Sorry, between the masks.
Yeah, I just received some emails with teachers concerned, about about their safety, and so it certainly is a thought
In-
that's out there, and
Anytime, I think, we all know that anytime, whatever model, we're going to
Sure.
have some risk. So I don't know, we don't have, these are the best answers we can supply today.
yeah, well, there's
What
no
about
100%.
dividers? I've seen pictures of dividers, the clear dividers that some teachers themselves have put up, in their classrooms. And I don't know, I am concerned too about elementary and that many kids in a classroom and spacing them out. And yet I do think being there to learn is.
It's important, sure.
But on the other hand, we have to, take our safety measures, and we have to be very, very proactive in those, washing hands. We can assure that all, our students are. There's a little more control there at the elementary that we can have control of,
Well, and
but it is a matter of,
keeping that age group of kids in their space all day long is a little concerning to me too, let's face it, they're active, they don't.
So what measures do we have if a student comes down, is tested positive in a classroom? So we have a classroom and that student's been tested positive. What do we do about quarantining that classroom, or, how does that affect?
we've talked about this, and there's all those what-if situations.
Sure.
And what we would do is, first we would call the Southeast Idaho, Public Health Department, and go with their guidance. If that room I know that they will have a series of questions that they will be asking on how, was the cohort, was the student in how many places were they, how close were they to others and all, and then we would follow their guidance there with that. And they do an investigation and all
Okay.
that we would.
Will you limit numbers in classrooms? To specific numbers?
We have not gone down that route.
How can you do that?
Yeah, you can,
Say,
You can need more.
say no more than,
more
some
teachers.
classrooms are larger and they can handle more students. Some classrooms are really small and to social distance, the same amount of students
I understand.
is different.
are we getting a lot of students that are being in the elementary, they're gonna be doing online?
We have about 8% of our student population that has chosen to go online.
Just
Both
8%?
elementary and secondary.
Mhm.
But other question that I have is, you know, the numbers change every day.
Mhm.
So how quickly can we respond when we know the numbers have gone up and it's not safe?
We can respond very quickly, and I think that's
March
probably a,
16th to March 17th. So our
Yeah.
teachers, for unit development this summer,
Mm-hmm.
we had them come up with 5, for lack of a better term, drop-and-go lessons. If March 16th we're in school and March 17th we're out of school, there are 5 lessons already prepared to say, these are your first 5 online.
Mhm.
And it gives the teachers about 5 days to come up with the next week's worth of stuff.
And we've done
Um,
that. We hired,
Mhm.
we had some designated with Mr. Orr, some teachers at all grade levels, so we have those for math and for ELA, all the
Social
way.
studies.
Social studies, science.
Science.
Yeah, social studies and science there, and in the elementary, it's math and ELA lessons across the board, so that, for 5 days, so that we're ready to go.
At a
And
drop
we
of a
don't
hat if
miss,
needed
we
to.
don't miss a day. They're lessons that can be taught out of sequence,
Mhm.
but they do definitely continue learning on their way. So they're ready to go, so that we can be ready to go, and we don't have to be just canceling school as teachers get ready.
And part of the reason I said we're suggesting hybrid, because if we were following our roadmap that we agreed to 3 weeks ago, we would be in that green section, and there would be, we would be going back to school as normal.
And no mask.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what we're hoping is that that hybrid, that soft opening in the middle school and high school will allow us to stay in school longer and be able to flatten whatever curve, that spike that may come, to be able to flatten that as much as we possibly can. And then part of the second page is that hybrid model is going to be looked at after the first 2 weeks. We're going to look at that every single week to say, hey, is our numbers steady? Are they gone up? Have they not? Do we need to stay in hybrid, or, do we need to go back to traditional and get everybody back in school? With that turnaround being, Friday we'll make that decision, and Monday we're back going to regular school, or nope, we're gonna stay in hybrid, or God forbid our numbers spike and we have to go to remote.
And that can
But
happen
that-
very quickly
Very
if
quickly can go.
if we move to they spike, we go, to a different category, we can move there very quickly. And the others, we want to make sure that we're maintaining if we go back a category. We'll want to make sure that we're back an instructional model. We'll want to make sure that we're maintaining, the numbers so that it's safe to go back.
Wouldn't that make sense to go hybrid on both of them? Right from the first, even if it's just 2 weeks, so you get a better feel for it. Everybody calms down a little bit, feels better about their situation, and then, I don't know, it just seemed to be, that's the easier move, to be hybrid across the board to
It's a
start.
lot more work for the students,
It's a
though.
lot more work
I mean,
for a
for
lot of
teachers.
people,
Well, and
but it might calm some fears with parents and/or staff.
I think so too. I mean, I
the,
think
some
it
of the,
would help parents not be, hearing they're gonna send their kids back to a whole classroom of,
Some-
I think we've offered the online option, which a lot of the parents with greater fears are taking advantage of that.
Mhm.
As Mrs. Craney pointed out, with the younger learners, we have direct instruction, we know works better because we're
I-
teaching those
I believe
basic
that.
skills.
Yeah.
I believe that.
Academic skills, whereas we're working more on deep and transfer levels with our older students. And so, also, I think we need the board to consider what the community is interested in. And you may have heard more broadly than what I imagine, but I think for our economy, we need, if our younger learners are in school, that allows our working parents to be at work,
Including our teachers.
including our teachers. And so that's, I think, that's a part of the discussion we haven't mentioned yet, but I think needs to be addressed a little bit.
Right.
because if we had that, and we, we've been talking about these things a lot, and we know that, like I said, it's hard, but if all of our teachers, if we were doing an A, a B, Wednesday would be a would be a day for remote learning, that the teachers would be in the building preparing the lessons, meeting with the students, and then an A and a B on Thursday and Friday. So they would be teaching every
5
one of
days a
their
week.
days. Their learners, their own students, their own children would be home on those alternate days.
Mrs. Minor is just a year out of a building, and I can see her on the edge of her seat. So I'd
Yeah.
like her maybe to come up and share her thoughts with you.
You can speak from there.
Okay.
Or stand
They
up.
can't because they can't
Up
hear.
here.
It's not plugged in.
Not plugged in?
I have a loud voice,
Go
how
for
about that? All right. And just a couple things I wanted to say, just in this new role as HR as well as some of our teachers. I want you to also know that we have had the opportunity to have some really great discussions with some of our health impaired teachers that have some real health concerns and some real serious health issues. And they've been able to fill out certain paperwork and be able to, a couple of those teachers are actually going to be our online teachers in elementary school. So really working with them to see what precautions we can put, or, you know, what areas of preventative things we could put into place for some of those teachers who have the real health compromise. I spoke individually to every teacher that's principal said that there was a concern that was brought up for their health issues. And so all of those teachers that I was able to have those conversations with, we had some awesome discussions. We have amazing teachers out there that were trying to weigh
Really
their
want
own
to.
health and weigh that of the learners. And every single one of the elementary ones was very passionate about seeing them, just because of like their skills at such a young age. You know, we had this meeting the other day that talked about how text is critical to a new learner. You know, if you're reading for fun, you can read it on a computer screen and it's a lot easier. But if you need text that's critical for your learning, you need to have that in print, and being able to have that for our younger learners. I just sit here and think as an elementary principal, like Doug said just a year out, that every principal at elementary level said that those kindergartners that came in for kindergarten registration, they were wearing masks. It was an amazing thing to see those 5-year-olds in masks. And I think if those expectations are set, that can happen so that learning can continue for those young learners who really, they need to be in a building to be able to know how to even hold their pencil correctly, those types of things. And so, and I can say this, and I haven't been at all their meetings, but I can't even tell you the principals and their conversations of, there's principals out there that have already put circles on their tables, so there's only 8 kids to a whole entire lunchroom table in a big elementary school. They've changed their lunch times. They have a little bit more flexibility than secondary, and that's why we feel so strongly about secondary being a part of that hybrid model, just because of those issues that we know. And in the elementary school, being able to, you know, some of those cases that where there's a classroom or where those interventions aren't being pulled out. Do you know what I mean? If there's space is a little bit more accessible in an elementary school. So I just wanted to let you know that we have looked and talked to many teachers as far as health concerned teachers and given some different opportunities for those people as well.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I'd like Mr. Minor to go ahead and come up and maybe the podium if you'd like. He could just talk to you a little bit about special services, and then we'll field your questions. And then ultimately we'll need some direction, and we are here to provide that assistance and implement whatever you decide for us today.
Well, we're ecstatic in the world of special education to have the opportunity, or at least be given an opportunity to have our special education kids come back into face-to-face model of interaction, right? We know, and research will bear this out, that students with special education needs, whether that be a learning disability, an emotional disturbance, a health impairment, they suffered to a greater degree than our general education kids during the soft closure. So our goal of having our special education kids come into a face-to-face model at the elementary level to support what you already heard really substantiates the importance of critical, developmental, first time out skills that our teachers need to impart upon our young learners. During our summer school experience this year, we had the opportunity of having special education learners in a building for a 6-week period of time, and we experimented with various models of face covering and distancing and so forth. And as part of that regular instructional model, our teachers were really spending time teaching our young learners the importance of understanding COVID, and social distancing and coughing into your sleeve and maintaining, good hygiene. And obviously that's an instructional component that our younger elementary kids and in their elementary programs will be getting a lot of that. For our special population learners at our elementary buildings, our kids who have, significant cognitive disabilities, having those kids remain in a model that they have less and less interaction with a professional teacher, slows down that life skill development that's critical for those young kids. In instances where we can make adjustments to a child's schedule, in instances where we can make accommodations for a child who for various conditions related to their disability may not be able to wear a mask, we're allowing teachers to get plexiglass barriers and structure their room in such a way to continue that instructional model at the elementary level. Certainly, our young learners are more vulnerable. That face-to-face interaction is critical. As we move into that hybrid model at the secondary level, just like what you've heard here, our secondary kids, although they have special education needs, are more independent. They can take, they can be home for longer periods of time. They can access material from their special education teacher. Still meeting 2 days a week in a hybrid model with half a class on a Monday and a half a class on Tuesday gives us, those special education teachers, really more time to be involved in explicit instruction with our special education kids while really allowing them to practice that social distancing. So, it's a cost benefit, right? And having our elementary kids come in a face-to-face model, practicing social distancing habits, working on keeping their masks on, being involved in face-to-face interaction with a professional teacher is good for all of our students, even better for our special education students. At the secondary level, if our special population programs need to develop systems where that student could come in and see their teacher on a regular basis, 5 days a week, those allowances can be made at that level. They wouldn't be able to cohort and move around in their general education classrooms quite to that extent that they would, but they would still have that critical face-to-face interaction with the professional teacher, working on, critical life skill development, working on their IEP goals. So it really is that cost-benefit ratio, and in my estimation, the younger learners, the more vulnerable learners at the elementary level really need that face-to-face contact, whereas not that they don't need that so much at the secondary level, but there are some allowances that can be made and some accommodations that can be made that can allow those secondary kids to progress in their IEP goals, while at the same time having 2 really good solid days of instruction with their special education teacher in a smaller cohort where more explicit instruction is possible.
Mr. Manford, clarification, you said vulnerable a couple times. You mean not in terms of the disease, but in terms of learning deficit, is that correct?
Yes, yeah. Now, vulnerable populations, right, at the elementary and middle school, high school level, I'm defining as students who have, more significant developmental needs, some of which are health impairment, some of which prevent the child from really understanding the concept of the importance of wearing a mask and the importance of social distancing. So, vulnerable meaning, we have a number of students who in a smaller controlled cohort setting could come, get some instruction, and be a part of a learning environment where in a large group setting, those vulnerabilities would be, I guess, exposed to a greater degree and put that child at a greater risk, I guess, if that answers your question.
So it's the opposite. Thank you, Mr. Manford. Okay, more questions, or if the board can discuss, that's our presentation today. We wanted to share with you as another option for consideration, in addition to the others that already existed.
Well, I'm fine with the hybrid model. I think that's a good way to go, and especially with secondary. I am still concerned about, you say you're gonna put these elementary kids in cohort groups, and that they'll stay in the same classroom all day for lunch, for everything, for music, for right? Isn't that what you
They'll
said?
stay
Music
with
would
their
become-
same classroom, yeah.
Yeah.
Not in the
Not- not
classroom, but
intervention.
with their classroom.
Mhm.
Oh, I felt, so not in,
Well, for
Like they can-
music and all, they'll stay in the classroom. When we have specialists, we'll,
recess.
yeah, they'll go out at recess. But recess is, you know, a low-risk activity. They'll, at lunch, they'll eat with their class, but it might be in the lunchroom at that point. And
oh,
we'll
so
have
they
to
don't
do,
have to eat in their classroom?
no, and that might be,
Okay.
and what
That's
we'll
what I
do.
thought you were saying, was they would have to stay in their classroom all day for everything.
No,
I-
we can see,
Yeah.
yeah,
Everybody's gonna come mess.
we can see them going in, and so there've been different models at different buildings, just as they've been processing this, just because we have different numbers of students in different configurations of our cafeteria. So there are some buildings that will have half of their students be eating, so let's say the third grade, they'll eat like with their classroom so that you can keep, you know, them together. But all third grade will be in there, you know, these 3 tables are Mrs. Jones' classroom. And then maybe the 5th grade will be, for example, the 5th grade may be eating in their room that week. Next week, then they flip it so that they don't. But in some schools, they don't have to do that because they don't have the number of students. And so they can more spread it out throughout the day. I know that, like Mrs. Miner was saying, we're still, you know how at an elementary school, you've been at an elementary school, typically there are like 10 kids on a side, you know, the table, they sit about like this, you know. And so we have dots where they're spacing themselves out, and the dots are over here so that they're not right across from each other. Things like that we're doing in our elementary schools in the lunchrooms and all.
Right.
But for music and those things, so that there's less passing in the hallways, less of that. Music, the music teacher would travel, you know, to the classroom to do music. Intervention teachers would go to the classroom rather than bringing groups of kids together in an intervention classroom around, you know, you can just see them around a kidney-shaped table.
I still believe that you need to have numbers assigned to classrooms of how many that they can, socially distancing-wise, take. And I realize you might not be able to go the 6 feet, you know, but I just realize, I know from teaching, some teachers get 30 kids, some teachers have 24, and you have the same size classroom. I mean, I just think that you need to find a way to make that more consistent.
As equitable as we can.
And even
As equitable as we can.
in classrooms, and set that up so that some aren't
So do we,
so crowded, and especially take into consideration the size of the classroom. I mean, I taught at Bonneville, our classrooms were really small, you know, and yet I could go to Ellis, you know, when I went to Ellis, and they had bigger classrooms and were more capable of taking, you know, of distancing and doing that. And that, I just think you have to consider that with elementary a little more. Some, like you said, some, you have to consider it in the cafeteria, you know, because some, like you said, some cafeterias are bigger and can accommodate more students. And I feel it's the same in a classroom, that you have to look at those classroom sizes and consider that.
And I think we would be able to do that to some extent, Mrs. Craner. We can certainly look at our list for the online learning, those students who, learners who have chosen that option, and balance best we can. But as we all know, the structures are in place. Oftentimes, we would have our maximum number of rooms, and we would do our best to balance that. But
I know that
the
there's.
space is limited.
And that you have boundaries, and you have, you know, all of that to consider, and I realize that, but I still think you need to make an effort there.
And
Be
we've asked
balanced
our
as we can.
teachers to take home anything that's not essential out of
Okay,
their.
that was gonna be one of my questions.
Yeah,
Yeah,
all the comfortable things that make it fun and inviting, we've asked them to
Yeah.
take those home so that we can just get to business. Yeah.
yeah.
And one of the things that Ms. Mann said on our conference call is that she talked to us a lot about that was where the decision you guys made to mandate masks was so important. Because, I mean, ideally, we would love to have 6 feet, but the fact that we can't in some situations, she said that the mask when we asked her, does the mask help that case? And she said it did. That, you know, by mandating masks, that was a huge benefit towards the fact that 6 feet would be so hard in some of our classrooms.
They said
And-
something like 3 feet with the
Mhm.
mask.
Good,
isn't it?
yeah.
The C-
And-
American
And maybe in
Pediatric.
some of those rooms where they're smaller or something, we could use more plexiglass or try something that would,
We
To
can get it.
maintain more.
you know, that would help offset
Mhm.
that proximity problem a little.
Mhm.
That would be
That may be,
my suggestion,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
just to make them safer.
I had another question that came actually through my husband's Rotary Club, but it's one thing to say masks in school. Are the masks being required on buses as well?
Yes.
That needs to be clarified out
Yep.
there.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Yep.
saw that.
We'll have sanitizer and even masks available to get kids to school. So we'll have a number of disposable masks. We don't want to make that a habit certainly, but we would supply them one to get them to school and for the day essentially. And then we'll have the cloth ones that
Mhm.
we'll be able to launder and have some on supply as well at the school.
Well, and I think
It is not
Younger
an easy
kids-
decision.
Oh.
We know that.
younger kids are pretty adaptable. I think they tend to do that and what they get used to, you know, they are good at doing that for the most part, I think, you know, so, but I didn't expect this, you know, to go back every day. That was a surprise to me.
Well, it's because we're in that green stage
Mhm.
that we've not encroached upon, but yet we're trying to make a consideration for what we know maybe more now than we do then. But again, the board,
And-
it's at your discretion and we will implement whatever you ask of us. And if there aren't any more questions for the administration.
Courtney has a question.
Oh, yes, please.
So from a public relations standpoint, we know that based on where our enrollment numbers are for the online learning program, people coming back to school, the surveys that we did right after the school year ended for the 2019-2020 school year, really our numbers support and the feedback that we've received indicates that parents want their kids back in school in person as much as possible. So I just wanted to reiterate that for your consideration.
And truthfully, we looked at modified traditional for secondary because we're not into that moderate stage yet, but is there something that we could do for modified traditional? And it was the hallways and lunchtime that we can't,
Can't monitor
we
that.
couldn't monitor. In the classroom, we were okay, but it's that hallway and lunchtime that just won't work.
And it is the
So-
difference there between the
Mhm.
elementary and the secondary that
They
kind
can do that.
of led
and-
us down that.
Yeah.
Mr. Benson, I know I may have miscommunicated a time for Ms. McGrory, but she was able to make it.
Well,
Oh, did
and
you?
I missed the public comment
Oh, okay.
stage, so,
Yeah, yeah, if that's okay.
yeah, just do it now.
I heard this mic isn't working, so
No,
I'll
just-
just come a little closer. I
Teacher.
can use my teacher voice. Yes.
Got it.
So, I do apologize. For some reason, I had it in my mind that this was like an executive session closed meeting.
Oh.
And Brenda texted me, "Are you coming?" And I was like, "Oh, no!" So I made it here. So, but I've been listening. So, Doug, and Lori and Sue and Brenda asked Jan Damron, who's our vice president and an elementary teacher, in last Friday and presented this plan to get our feedback. We both agreed that this was a very workable plan. It acknowledges the differences in the needs between elementary and secondary students, the needs and the capabilities. Like the parents, we want our kids back in school, we want to see them, but we have to keep in mind the safety factor for everyone. Not only for the staff, but for the students and for everyone's families. And that's, I think this plan does a great deal to alleviate some of the anxiety, alleviate some of the risk factors for that transmission. So we are very supportive
have a question. I know Mr. Nye had sent some emails and, or you had forwarded some things of, they're having a special meeting, am I right, on the 24th of August?
Yes.
To consider liability issues and things. So can you tell us our standing there, or do we just have to wait and see what they do?
I'm afraid that's a wait and see, because the agenda's still being developed, and then the governor will make a determination, because he can, has the authority to call that special meeting. But we are certainly in favor of that proposed change for the rule.
And so will this affect, do we have to do a wait and see kind of thing? Will this affect our plan at all?
I do not believe so, because any liability would be so specific to say that it was only the district where the contact or exposure was made. I think it would be very difficult for someone to say that they had been nowhere else other than school and in the classroom.
Oh, God.
Right, and so, I mean, there's a burden of proof certainly that would rest there, and I think we would be okay to move forward.
They haven't been anywhere else and nobody's been to them.
Right, yeah, yeah. Oh, okay, the comment online is that those watching via the Facebook live streaming
Can't hear
cannot hear you.
Oh.
Yep.
I'll take it off.
So if there aren't any more questions for us, Mr. Hanson, you could take a look at those
Yeah.
options.
Yeah, we have two options here to consider.
Discussion and voting.
First option is a traditional face-to-face for all schools. And hearing today, I don't know if that we want to even consider that.
No.
Is that it?
No, I don't want.
Okay, all right. Then we go on to option two, is the,
Are you
Yeah.
reading from somewhere?
yes.
It's right there in the addendum.
It's in the addendum?
Well, no, I'm sorry, it's on the
Okay.
agenda, rather.
Option,
Sorry, Jackie.
Action items?
Yes, under the action items on considering
Okay.
categories,
Okay,
there's option 1 and option 2.
okay. Sorry.
and, okay,
Or
well,
any other options that you,
yeah, well, the option two is modified traditional for the elementary and hybrid for the all secondary. And then we could throw out a third one, hybrid all schools. And can I get some feedback from anybody here before we bring this to vote?
I do see the problem with hybrid for everybody, for elementary teachers, you know. Of course, that's gonna be a problem for secondary teachers too, isn't it, kids?
what's that?
About kids? No, just elementary teachers?
Well,
Should we-
sorry, like,
I mean, that was a reason you gave, was because
Well,
of.
okay, so we have teachers at all levels that have young children, and if they're elementary age students, those secondary teachers and elementary teachers, if we went on hybrid, they would be working 5 days a week, but their younger elementary kids would be home alone, or daycare or something, for 3 days of those. Secondary students are old enough, or most of them are old enough to be capable of
Take
staying.
care of themselves.
Mhm.
So that's a problem, is what happens if we hybrid elementary,
Correct.
and I can see that issue.
Yeah, I think we ought to give that a go, just the way it was presented, with the option that, that we can react promptly if there's going to be a problem. If there,
Right,
Option two
agree.
you're talking about?
yeah, right.
Yeah,
I agree.
You agree?
Mhm.
Janie?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
okay. Then we'll go.
Did you get a motion?
No, we're just gabbing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gabbing. Everybody hear me? We're gabbing.
Do we have to put that in our motion though, about?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we
About
do.
that we can change at any time?
I think we know that.
Right,
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's just,
that's built into the roadmap.
yeah, yeah, so, Okay, I would entertain a motion to consider taking action to open the 2020-21 school year using a modified traditional model for elementary and a hybrid model for secondary. Is there a motion?
I move that we accept option 2 as read.
And I'll second that motion.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I didn't hear everybody, okay. That motion is passed, and that concludes this meeting. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Hearing none opposed, I hereby declare this meeting adjourned.
Oh, you pushed me right to the minute, didn't you?